after all the excuses that Moses gave to God, God finally ran out of patience and said, "Look, Moses, what is that that's in your hand?" And so Moses looked and he said, "Well, it's a staff, like we have here." He said, "It's one that I use to protect my sheep." I suspect that over the years that this staff had become second nature to Moses, that he knew its feel, its grip, its weight, its balance. He used the crook to pull the sheep in off the edge of a cliff. He used the stick to scare away wolves and other wild animals, and at the end of a long, weary day, he used it as a walking stick. But in God's power, this simple stick became a snake. This simple stick turned the Nile into blood and then back to water again. This simple stick invoked plagues on the Egyptians, parted the waters of the Red Sea. When it struck a rock, so much water came out that it was enough for the 1,000,000 refugees that were there and all of their herds of animals. Indeed, a simple stick can do amazing things when it is surrendered to God's power. What is in your hand? According to the Bible, God hadn't asked a question. God hadn't spoken at all for 400 years. It was a long silence of God. And the question that breaks the silence is this: what is that in your hand? God continues to ask that question to all of us. What is that that's in your hand? Because God has placed something in your hand, probably not a shepherd's staff, but the possibilities are really sort of endless. And it doesn't have to be something that makes you an expert or have your doctorate in or have a rank or even a business card about it. All we have to do is just recognize whatever it is God has placed in our hand. It could be a spiritual gift. It could be an ability, a hobby. It could be as simple as a relationship or a little bit of time. But God has placed something in everybody's hand. I know we all like to think we're special, but there's nobody so special that they missed this. In fact, most of us have quite a few things in our hands. Maybe we have many spiritual gifts and abilities and interests and relationships and more time than we realize. All we have to do is be available. When Moses made that simple stick available, it became an instrument of miracles. Doing everything that Moses did from that point on, doing everything that Moses did was possible only when he was willing to let go of his beliefs concerning his own inadequacies. He had to let go of his own beliefs about his own inadequacies and then instead believe in the power of God that could work through him. The whole nation of Israel was waiting for Moses to recognize what was in his hand. The whole people under the knee of slavery were waiting for liberation, the liberation that Moses held in his hand. What is that in your hand? You may be called to liberate a nation or simply the person next door, to help a mom who needs a break, or an older person who needs a friend, or an unemployed person who needs some encouragement, or a church committee that just needs more people. There's just so many needs in the world. Some are really big needs like starvation in Somalia, or education in South Sudan, or the injustice of our criminal justice system. Some are major. Others are apparently not so major, but yet all of them are important. And God's solution to all of those needs, whether they're big or whether they're small, God's answer to the injustices and the pain and the problems and the hurts of the world is us. It's you and me. But like Moses, we make excuses. We say, we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we don't have time, nobody's going to follow us, I have no charisma, I can't speak in front of people. Moses was 80 years old. He had been a recluse for 40 years. He was going to retire there. He was going to die there. You talk about some legitimate excuses. But look how God used Moses and a simple stick. This area around Calvary, this area in Northern Virginia, as you well know, I'm not telling you something you don't already know, is just exploding with growth. People of all ages, from all over the world, are moving here to this community. Some of them are moving for the second or third time, because when they come back, they love this community and they love this church, so they want to move back right here. Some are moving here for the first time, because this is sort of, where life is happening. And they have yet to discover that this church, but they will, that this church will change their lives. So many people have been shaped by this church. I mentioned it when we talked about the scholarships. Every week that I'm here, I encounter more people who are better people because of the ministry of this church. And those people have gone on to shape this community, this nation, and some even to impact the world. It's as if nothing can stop this church from God's powerful witness. God continues to ask Calvary, what is that that's in your hand, Calvary? What have I placed there? And this is what we have in our hand. We have people. The most valuable gift we have is we have people. People who have weathered the storm of COVID and stayed. People of great faith and commitment that through all the changes in the past 100 years are still here. In our hands, we have a strong youth program, a growing music ministry, a life-forming preschool, a life-impacting mission program. We have here in our hands, what God has placed in our hands at Calvary, a group of disciples who truly foster faith, cherish community, and thrive in Christ's love. You have so much in your hand. And Jesus says, just a little salt can flavor the whole pot. Just a little yeast can raise the whole loaf. Just one small candle can chase out all of the darkness. Just a mustard seed of faith can move mountains. That's what Jesus said, just a little. But listen to what Jesus said exactly. Very truly, I tell you. When he says very truly, that means listen up, people. Very truly, I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. The one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. Oh, wait, he says, in fact, will do greater works than these. And we say, wait a minute. Greater than changing water into wine, greater than healing a paralyzed man, greater than feeding 5,000 people with 2 fish and 5 little pieces of bread, greater than walking on water, greater than giving sight to a man born blind, greater than bringing the dead back to life. I mean, who could do greater works than these? And Jesus says, you can. Oh, we say, oh, not me. Maybe Billy Graham or Mother Teresa or the Pope, but not me. I don't have enough faith. And Jesus said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, I wore my mustard seed earrings today so that you could see how tiny a mustard seed is. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you, is what Jesus says to us. Nothing will be impossible for you. Now, we know that nothing is impossible for God, and sometimes that's hard for us to believe even that. But nothing impossible for us? I didn't even know that was in the Bible. Peter was one of Jesus' 12 disciples, and he tried so hard, and he just never could get anything quite right. But yet, eventually, the book of Acts tells us that the people in Jerusalem would line the streets. They knew the path that Peter took to get to the temple each day, and they lined the path of that, hoping that his shadow would fall across them, because if it did, it would heal them. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that says that Jesus' shadow healed anybody. Greater things than these will you do. And indeed, greater things were done by the followers of Jesus. The crowds gathered to hear Jesus teach and to be fed. But when Peter preached his very first sermon, and let me tell you, most people, their very first sermon is a little rough. But when Peter preached his very first sermon, 3,000 people made the decision to follow Jesus. 3,000 people were baptized as a result of the sermon. Jesus never had that kind of response to his teachings or his sermons. Indeed, greater things than these will you do. So pick up that stick and do what God is asking you to do. I mean, think what would have happened if Moses had not taken up his staff. How different his life would have been. How different the world would have been. Maybe the reason the world is in the shape that it's in right now is because we have not recognized what is in our hand and we have not made it available to God. Indeed, we live in a world of desperate need, of war and hunger and slavery and child labor and racism and homelessness and loneliness and fear and cancer and COVID. And we feel helpless in front of all of it. That we have nothing but this stick that's supposed to somehow move a mountain. But Jesus said, ask for anything in my name and I will do it. Anything. We can ask for peace or prosperity or justice or beauty or healing or faith, anything. Next month, Reverend Sherry Daniels will be here to lead you forward. She came this past Thursday, and we had a delightful time with her, the several members of the church as well as the staff. And I have to tell you, I've told her incredible things about the potential of this church because it is true. You see, God actually believes that this church can change this community and maybe even change the world. So as good as the last 100 years have been here, God knows that the best days of this church are before you and not behind you. Allow the good news of Jesus Christ to embolden you. Allow that good news just to wash over you and embolden you so that you say, hey, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I mean, get out of my way. Watch me. Watch what God can do through me. Jesus fed 5,000 people. I, too, can feed the hungry. Jesus forgave sins. I can forgive people who have hurt me and those I love. Jesus walked on water. I can make waterways pure and drill wells in Africa. Jesus changed water into wine. I can change wine into water for those who are addicted. Jesus brought the dead back to life. I can bring life to those who live as if they are dead. So think about it. What is that is in your hand? And Calvary, what is it that God has placed in the hands of this church? Amen.